Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, like you meet him, Angelo, joined by my co-host, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Daniel, how are you?
Good, Angelo. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Baron Von Kelleher, Mike Kelleher, how you doing, brother?
I am in a dastardly mood. I am great.
Dastardly and great altogether, huh?
Yeah, well, when you're a Baron, you're supposed to be like an evil super genius or something. So
you kind of look like Snidely Whiplash right now.
Hey, you know.
And the resident movie maker, Mike Messier, documentarian, filmmaker, actor, producer, writer. This guy just does everything.
Glad to be here,
Mike,
Angelo.
what your film company's called? Man in the Camera? What is it?
Yeah, pretty much. Man in the Camera Films. I've been using that name for about 15 years now, and it's really the DIY aesthetic. You know what I mean? Just if you have a camera, and these days, men and women have cameras on their phones. So I mean, a lot of people can be making films, or at least starting to do something creative in that realm, without a lot of money or anyone else's permission. So I always encourage people that if they have an idea for a film, to write something, shoot something, do something. Don't wait for anyone else's permission.
Right.
Good advice.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to talk a little bit about our guest last night. We had an amazing guest last night. Getting a lot of feedback on her show. She's a woman that's not shy about her opinions and doesn't hold back. Of course, talking about Karen McDaniel with us last night, and she is a hoot. Karen was a hoot. And Dan, that was your first introduction to Karen McDaniel. What'd you think? Your maiden voyage, by the way, was your first time out.
It was. I think it was a great introduction, and it was growing up. He was one of my favorites. It was nice to hear a lot of those stories, and you could tell there's so much more there. I look forward to a chance to talk to her again.
And you will, probably in another 2 weeks. I spoke to her today. She's all excited about coming back.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Mikey, what did you take from last night's conversation with Karen?
Well, Karen is spectacular, and you can see why Wahoo would have the interest in her as a person, because she's very dynamic, take no BS type of person. And for these pro wrestlers, especially back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, when things were really like the wild, wild west, they needed someone like a Karen McDaniel who was a strong person to balance them. You know what I mean? So
sure.
I mean, it was a good conversation.
Baron Von Kelleher, you were with us on the first show with Karen.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on Mrs. McDaniel?
She was awesome. I mean, I just had a really good time, kind of like what these guys were saying, just listening to her stories. And, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in some of her really important moments in her life, because she witnessed a lot, and she probably caused a lot of things to happen, if you will. So
yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
She's a very unique lady. Speaking of unique, we have a guest tonight that stands tall and above those that are unique, different, and unusual, because he is a successful singer-songwriter, accomplished musician, actor, writer, producer, and he survived the world of wrestling, and that makes him unique and special.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And having done that, made his name and his mark. We all know his music. Not everybody knows his name, and that's a shame, but through our show, thankfully, we have actually had requests to have him back, and he is back tonight. He gave us What a Rush, Superfly, Sexy Boy, Do the Bird, Demolition, High Energy, All American Boys, Rock Out, Common Man Boogie, oh my God, Haircut, I'm the Mountie, All About the Money, Cool, Cocky, and Bad, you name it. He has written just about every successful ring entrance theme, along with his partner Jimmy Mouth of the South Hart, that I think people even today are somewhere in the world singing, "I'm a sexy boy, I'm a cool." Let me introduce you to the man that really does, in many ways, need no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. He is, as I said, a singer-songwriter, accomplished musician. He is the most successful wrestling theme song writer in history. It is my honor to introduce my friend, his most important credential. He is my friend, Hurricane John J.J. Maguire. J.J., welcome back.
Thank you so much. And hey, guys, how are y'all? It's great talking to y'all. And thank you for all those accolades. And that's so kind of you to say those words. And I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the great wrestling fans and people around the world who got a lot out of the music and had fun with it and still listen to it, which surprises me after all these years and beers. It still seems to be popular.
Well, JJ, I was going to ask you about that. Do you ever get people come up to you and start singing your songs to you?
Yes, I do. Quite often, I sure do. Mm-hmm.
Is that an odd kind of feeling? I imagine, JJ, it's kind of like being an impressionist, and doing the person in front of them.
Pretty much so, but I don't mind because I love the people so much. It wouldn't amounted to anything or meant anything at all without the people and the fans and everybody that enjoys it and supported it, and I would have just wound up being another parlor piano player had it not been for the great world of wrestling.
JJ, I introduced you as a successful and accomplished singer-songwriter, musician, and my friend. And I should tell people, J.J. Maguire and I are friends, and we speak often. And there are things I don't ask J.J. because it would spoil an interview. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions tonight that we've not talked about.
Great.
All right. You wrote a really impressive book, a compelling book called Hollywood, My Life in Heaventown. And a lot of people know you, of course, as the WWE Music Man. But you've done so much more outside the world of wrestling that a lot of people may not know about. I want to talk a little bit and delve into tonight a little bit of your Hollywood experience, your Nashville experience. And if you're game, I'd like to talk a little bit about music and wrestling from your point of view as a fan of wrestling. Are you game for it?
I'm all excited. I've got bells on my toes and rings through my ears.
I love it. That's a picture and a half.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about the book. When we left off, we hadn't even gotten really into what you've done out in Los Angeles. We spoke largely about wrestling, a little bit about being involved with Hulk Hogan's boot band and writing that album, and life in Nashville. Of course, you're very familiar with the Nashville music scene, but give people an insight, JJ, into the world of Hollywood. This world that everybody wants to be a part of. Everybody wants to be a star. They all want to be known and discovered and in some way adored. Let's peel the onion. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm dropping my microphone, JJ. Let's pull the onion back a little bit, JJ, and talk about your experience in Hollywood. Was it overall generally a good one, or were there times when you thought to yourself, I got to get the hell out of this town?
Oh, I loved it from the first day I arrived. The way that I wound up out there is I listed my name there was a worldwide listing agency for musicians that was posted around the world through newspaper. And, we didn't have the computer and internet and everything like we have now, where it's instant. But so I paid $200 to be a lifetime member of this agency that circulates your information and what instruments you can play and experience level and so forth. And so the first call that I received as soon as I got out there was from the Rolling Clones. They were the world's #1 Rolling Stone tribute band. Okay.
That's funny.
And they were interested. They wanted me to be the Charlie Watts of that outfit. I thought that was interesting, but I told them, and they were making great money, doing this. So they were, the top dog on that, one of the first actual tribute groups that existed, I believe, actually.
Wow.
And they were worldwide known and booked. But I told them, I said, it sounds really great, and I love the Stones, but I'm looking for something original. I'm not looking to be in a tribute band or do copy music, even though it's great music and what have you. So then I got a call from a group called The Keys, Keyz, and they were a new wave power pop band that we called. And to break that down for people who wonder, what is that? That's like the Knack, if you remember.
Oh, sure.
My Sharona.
Right.
Yeah,
skinny
exactly.
ties, short hair, skinny ties, and tight-fitting breeches, brothers. So I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And so I got all my stuff together to make my trip out. And right as I got ready to go the night before, I got another call from somebody who saw my name listed with the agency. And this is going to blow your mind. And these guys said, we're from Atlanta, and we're the new type of alternative music. And I went, yes, I'm familiar with all. I'm more of a hard rocker and classic rock. Well, we call it classic rock today, but then it was just basic rock, hard rock at that time.
Right.
And he said, we're into this new genre called alternative music.
Yeah.
And he said, we're college guys, and we're real popular around Atlanta. And he gave me a name, and it was just a kind of generic name. And so I said, well, this sounds interesting, but I'll be honest with you. I said, I'm not looking for, alternative music. I'm looking more for straight ahead rock and whatever.
Yeah.
And it turned out that they were, their drummer just recently died. I'm trying to think of their name. My memory is
REM?
gone. But REM, thank you very much.
REM.
Yes, sir.
And
It was
2 for 2,
REM.
Angelo.
Yes, thank you for that. And at any rate, he described the music to me and everything, and I said, well, it sounds like a real nice thing, but, I'm just into a different genre, but I'm sure you guys will do real well. Oh, wow. And we know how that turned out. So,
Yeah, right.
that was, they turned into REM. Their first name was something different, but they were just playing around the Atlanta scene,
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, so I got with this Keys group, and we immediately got a deal at Sound City with Joe Gottfried and Tom out there. That was, they were the kingpins of the California sound, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
I'm old. I remember that.
yes, and we're old enough to know. And so actually, their agent came to a club called Blackie's that's at the beach in Santa Monica. He actually was coming to hear another band for possible signing. Well, they were sick, and they had called us earlier in the day at the 11th hour and said, we're sicker than heck out here. We can't sing or do anything. Would the Keys, would you all mind covering for us at Blackie's with 2 other groups? Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that agent was sitting out there, and he came to see that the other group, it was ill, and he didn't know. They didn't call and tell him that they weren't going to make it. They just figured they were going to be there.
Yeah.
Well, they heard us and immediately came running up, and it was Les Emerson, who was in the 5-man electrical band from Canada.
Oh, God.
Remember?
Yeah, sure.
And he was the lead singer and guitar player, and he was working for Sound City as a A&R agent looking for talent for Joe
Right.
Gottfried Stein that owned it. He just had a fit. He jumped up and ran up there. We did all original material, of course. I was the drummer, and it was the other guy's material. I didn't write any material. I just added, the drum parts and whatever.
Right.
And he said, you guys, I came to hear the other group, and I'm glad they're sick. He said, come out to Sound City. I went, Sound City? Oh, my gosh. He said, come to Sound City on Tuesday, and we've got something to talk about. So we go to Sound City on Tuesday. We set up in the rehearsal hall. Devo is practicing right next door to us in the same
Oh, my God.
complex. The Babies were cutting their album right across from us, and Tom Petty was recording, and Rick Springfield. We're all out there at the same time together.
It's a lot of
That
talent
is
under one
crazy.
roof.
Yeah, under
That's
one
nuts.
big complex there. But So pretty excited on that. So we did 4 single sides because you still had, vinyl, 45 RPM and 33 and thirds, which is back bigger than Christmas now. But anyway, so Joe Godfrey came in. He said, let's hear it. And so we went through our routine, and the whole time he shook the change in his pocket. And when we got through, Les Emerson, the agent for him, that was originally with a 5-man electrical band, he told us, he said, you guys are in. And we said, how do you know? Because when Joe shakes his change in his pocket, you're going to make it. You're on the way, brother. And we said, well, that sounds great. So we went in and we recorded 4 single sides. And then in the middle of all that, the guys that were the leaders of the band, of the keys, decided that they wanted to do a different type of music. And I told them, I says, guys, to be out here, to be at Sound City and a legendary place like this, and having all this available to us, and with Joe behind us and the whole thing, with a roster of Tom Petty and Fleetwood Mac, and we recorded in the same room as Fleetwood and Tom and everybody.
Wow.
I said, you're never going to get a chance like this again in your life, brothers.
No shit.
And so they say, well, we decided, well, why? I said, why didn't you decide you wanted to do a different music before we signed these contracts and so forth? Well, you know how it is. I said, yeah, I know how it is. You're going to wind up deader than a doornail.
Exactly.
And not by me. And then they wound up being a 50s cover group, and that was the last I heard of them. So
that's amazing.
They broke the band up. Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, JJ, the story that you relate parallels a couple of stories that I know of personally. You heard of a guy, you maybe have heard of him a time or two. He recorded a few songs called Christopher Robin and Footloose. Okay. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Kenny Loggins?
Yeah, just some guy that nobody ever heard of.
Yeah.
He was discovered in Santa Barbara, California as an opening act for an act that the agent actually came to see and end up discovering Kenny.
That's the same thing for us with Sound City. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I know that story. Kenny Loggins was basically just an opening act at the time. And the other story that you related that parallels actually into wrestling, Vince McMahon Sr., when he knew that he had a star in the making, would have 4 quarters in his hand. And he would play with this change. He would play with these quarters. He'd flip them up on top of each other. It was kind of reminiscent of the story you told about the guy with the jingling the change in his pocket.
Yes, Joe Godfrey.
Vince McMahon used to do when he had a star in the making. Well, I got 3. Yeah, go ahead, JJ. Go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
I was just thinking, you click something in my memory. Okay, so after the Goofballs broke the band up to get out of the contracts to do 50s music and never surface again, Jimmy Hart called me because, I had been in the Gentry's prior to moving out there. He said, Maguire, I'm coming to Los Angeles, and I don't know where anything is. He was scared to death, wondering how to get around. He said, you can pick me up at the airport, can't you? Because you know where everything is. And I said, well, sure, Jimmy, I'll chaperone you, no problem whatsoever. And so I set up an appointment with Joe Godfrey, the owner of Sound City. And we went in and we played. Jimmy had a few things that he had done himself in Memphis. And then we had some stuff that he and I had done together in Memphis and played some stuff. And Joe loved it. And he looked at us and put his finger to his cheek and he thought, I know that there's money here, and this is good stuff, but I don't know how I would promote wrestling music. Can you believe that?
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes, amazing. And so he said, give me about a week to think about how this would be marketed. And we said, no problem, Joe, this sounds great, and I'll get back to you in a week. And so then I called him back a week later, and he said, I know there's something there, but I don't know how to go about promoting it and selling it exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing like that had been done on yet. See?
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, but I'm still thinking, but I don't have a clear-cut view of how to market this. Well, too bad. He sure missed a big boatload right there.
I'm telling you what, brother. I'm telling you what.
He discovered Fleetwood Mac and paid for their apartment and bought their food for them and told them, you just stay in this apartment and you write the best material that you can do. I'll pay for everything. They didn't have a damn dime. Joe made them. And you see people, fans, they go, they're great. People don't know the backstories a lot behind how these artists and even Elvis and some of the greatest of all time, are discovered. And
well, that's why you're here, JJ. I want the behind the scenes. I want the stories that you tell so well, both to us and in your book, Heaventown, Hollywood, My Life in Heaventown, which is, I recommend highly. It's a great book. And I actually have a copy, and I really do. But you know what, JJ? I got 3 guys sitting over here very patiently. They're all squirming in their seats, though. They want to ask you questions.
Yeah, sure.
So we're going to start with my new co-host, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Dan, you got 2 questions for JJ. We're going to go around the table.
All right. Going off, I listened to your first interview and as introduced to some of your material. If we can bounce back to the wrestling topic for a second, you had a really interesting point where you were talking about how you come up with music for characters that you've never seen or for people that you've never watched perform. I'm curious, has that ever, how to word this, have you ever written music and then watched it used live and your thought be like, holy crap, that is not the right song for this person at all? Yeah, I mean, have you ever or had that moment where it's like, oh, I wish I had done something? I'm curious how that thought process goes.
No, it was just like magic. Everything just fell into place just effortlessly. Vince would come to the back, like I would bring my portable setup, like I talked about on the other show, to the Coliseums and whatever. And we had a room in the back, right next to actually had one time I was right next to Zeus. You remember Zeus? And he came in for a while. Yeah, Tiny Lister. Yeah. And so I had a sampler that we were, the super fly. Of course, that's me doing all that, the voice and the music and the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But so I had that sample on my keyboard and I touched that. But then when he went to the bathroom, I went, Zeus, 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 Zeus. And he came back and I turned that up real loud and all the boys heard that and started laughing. He did too. And he came over and he said, brother, how you doing that? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you. It's going to cost you to know. But Tiny was a nice guy. But the boys were really, they were jealous of him because he was a movie star and not a real wrestler. But he did a great job, as you remember, for those that can remember. And
sure.
And but anyway, so point I'm making is Vince would come down, Jimmy'd run out and do a match and whatever, and then he'd run back and go, Maguire, have you got all that rhythm section together? Are you ready to go? So I'm going to have Vince come on down. So then Vince would come down and go, Maguire, what do you got this time? What are you and Jimmy doing this time? And Jimmy go, boss, here it is. Here's how it starts. Hit it, Maguire. And then, of course, I would hit what I'd came up with, and Jimmy would have had lyrics. He would sing over me playing that with a drum machine and just a basic setup. And Vince, he never turned down anything we did. It was just instant, like, okay, thank you very much. And can you have that ready to go on the audio truck within, say, like 20 minutes? Yes, sir. And I'm going to say, no, Vince, I can't do that. I'm sorry. No. And many times the Honky Tonk Man theme, when they first started, before it was recorded on the Pile Driver album, it was me playing all the instruments and everything in the beginning and everything before that deal was made. And I literally put the final touch on it and ran it over to cassette. Using cassette still at that time. and ran as 100 miles an hour to the audio truck and handed it to the audio kingpin, and he literally put it on and had 10 seconds to cue it up for the audience to hear, for him to come out. I mean, last second stuff. That happened a few times, and it was pretty wild, but it was a real pleasant thing. And you must understand that WWF in those years, I'm talking from 86, starting in 86, that's when we started doing some stuff for them. And it was great because it was a real nice family setup. You could go to Vince at any time and say, hey, boss, listen, can I ask you a question? If you went up there today and tried to go down the hall and go see Vince, they'd probably call security and have you arrested, But it was a great feeling. It was a cheerful feeling. Everybody listened to one another. Of course, there was jealousy between talent in the back. That still goes on. You're never going to get away from that.
JJ, I have a question for you along those lines. What you were saying just now prompted a question.
Sure.
You talked about Vince being approachable and, one of the boys and part of the family. When did you see Vince change, and what was it that changed him? Would you remember that moment, or can you kind of pinpoint a time frame?
Well, to me, he was always the same. I think if I were to go to a show next week and talk to him, he would be the same Vince that I always remember and know. But to me, the Viva la Difference came, to answer your question, is when they went to being a publicly traded company. You see, prior to that, it was just a bunch of guys talking and having a good time and entertaining people. But as soon as it went corporate, per se, in that way, publicly traded company, and you got a board of directors of 90,000 people. Listen, the people that ran that whole company when we were doing all that was basically three people. You had Vince, you had Pat Patterson, and you had Kevin Dunn, and that's what you got.
Yeah.
And that was formidable talent and entertainment and whatever. But times change and people's desires and interests change, and WWE, they want to change with the times. So a lot of people say, hey, they're still stuck and so and so. But Vince, there's only one person in the wrestling world who knows everything about wrestling.
Yeah.
And that is Vince McMahon. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. JJ, you mentioned Kevin Dunn. You've been around quite a bit of film and television in your career. How does Kevin Dunn fare as a television director?
He's unbelievable. He can take an audience of 50 and make it look like 5,000. He's a formidable director and formidable talent. That's all I got to say, period.
Baron Von Kelleher, two questions for JJ.
All right, JJ. So remind us what year was it roughly when you went out to LA and you were contacted by the Rolling Stones cover band, tribute band?
Yes, that was 1979.
So the Rolling Stones were still performing and still doing their thing.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yeah. And they endorsed this group. They liked this group because really it just was advertising for the real thing.
Oh, absolutely. And it just helped when the Rolling Stones can only be in one place at a time. It helped keep the world kind of warm and keep it in their minds. So that's great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure, they were all for it. Mm-hmm.
I should point out that we have a J.J. Maguire lookalike that performs down the coffee shop down the street, but he sounds like Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Oh, well, he must be quite a pea picker then.
Oh, man.
Okay, Mikey, one more question. Go ahead, baby.
Yeah, I'm getting my second question in here. So, so the keys. I was looking on my phone, to see if I could find any of the songs that the Keys recorded, but I'm guessing none of it saw the light of day.
Well, it did, and it didn't at the same time. We changed the name from the Keys when we signed with Sound City and Joe Gottfried to the Rage, R-A-G-E.
Okay.
We had a song called NYC, which talks about New York, and it was all high-powered. We kind of sounded like a blend between the Who and the Beatles and the Knack, and all that. If you can imagine, kind of all that grouped up into one newer type of sound. That was
can't go wrong with the Beatles,
right?
No, we had Beatle type sound in a lot of music. These guys were good writers, and the material was really excellent. And I will give them credit where credit's due, but they were just jabronis as far as understanding about the chances in the business. When you get chances at that level, you better run the whole route and see where you get. Because it's not likely you're going to get another chance like that.
JJ, have you ever written, well, I know you've written songs for a lot of people. Have you ever written a song for a person that they were thrilled with that you were less than happy about?
No, not really. Everybody always liked everything that I ever came up with or that Jimmy and I came up with. Nobody... It's like when we did the audition thing for Thunder in Paradise, they wound up remodeling the whole show around us. I think I told that story on the other show, how it all worked out. Yeah, sure did. And everybody just always accepted us and myself and Jimmy both, either separately or together, and however, with open arms. There was never any real problems, to be honest with you.
That's remarkable, because I know a lot of singer-songwriters, having been in the music business. I spent my life in two businesses, wrestling and music.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to know quite a few of the boys in wrestling and a lot of successful singer-songwriters. And I've not met any singer-songwriter or composer that was happy with everything they've done. So you are really unique. And as I said at the top of the show, you're kind of an enigma in the business, that, everything that you've done, you hit it out of the ballpark. You really have. You've been really, really fortunate.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate you really saying that. But my heart, like I said, we didn't put this music together, and I didn't put the music together to beef up my ego. I tried to create something that would beef up the audience's ego, because it's all about them anyway. Without them, you got no wrestling, you got no music, you got no nothing.
Yeah.
And I really, really, really wanted to create something that would entertain the people. That's the bottom line. And Jimmy Hart and I are two guys we're all about entertainment.
Speaking of entertainment, we've got two questions from our resident filmmaker, Mike Messier. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, JJ. It's good to speak with you again, buddy.
Thank you.
And
you too.
And thanks. And I remember from the last time I said to the guys after you were off the call that JJ Maguire is the perfect type of collaborator because he does all the work.
well, that's nice of you to say that, but I did a lot of the heavy lifting. But Jimmy Hart is a genius, and he hears everything perfect. And like I said, when I wrote the Rockers theme, I played it, and it was like dun 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 dun. He said, "Hold it, Maguire. Wait a minute. You seen how fast they run to the ring? About 100 miles an hour." He says it needs to be faster. So I went, okay. Dun 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 dun. Just stuff like that makes something.
Yeah,
it's a good team.
Those type of advice, that type of advice and suggestions is a big part of our success, Jimmy and my success together, because he gave me free reign. What do you got, Maguire? What do we got for so and so?
Right.
Okay, here's what I got. Oh, I like it. He said, let me take this pencil. And then he write down, and we do Sexy Boy or whatever. I came in and had all the chords and everything, and then he went, he's so cool, he's so sexy, mom, and then write that down. and we just had we still have it, a magical, mystical, mystery ability that's almost a psychic talent.
Well, speaking of which, let's talk about that talent. You've had quite a few wrestlers record their own music.
Mm-hmm.
Shawn Michaels comes to mind, of course, from Sherry Martel.
Mm-hmm.
But
$1 Million Man.
What's it like with a guy who's really not a professional singer, stepping into a studio and cutting a track for his own music? Is it difficult? Do they give you input? Do you take suggestions, or you say, this is the song, here's how it's sung, do it?
That's basically what it is. The first thing we did like that was with Jerry Lawler in Mid-South. We did a record for him. He had this grand idea about doing a record and selling it at the matches.
Really? I don't know about that one. I must have
Was that called King of the Ring? Was that called King of the Ring, JJ?
No, it was the song that we did. We covered. It was the disco era. This was in the latter 70s. So.
It was a disco song, JJ?
Yes, so I took Breaking Up Is Hard to Do by Neil Sedaka and made it disco.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and it went over fabulous. Nobody had done that yet. WWF or WWF, they didn't have any records. Nobody did. This was a pioneering thing. This is another important thing about Mid-South wrestling that's so important to wrestling history and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very important. And even though I'm the music guy, I can tell you that you just look at all that talent that came out of Mid-South and ICW.
Yeah.
That's your greatest icons that's ever put on a pair of tights, brother. And I hope they save, they got the money to save the Memphis, the auditorium down there, because that thing is that's the birth of modern wrestling, brother. That's all I can tell you. And
Mikey Messier, I stepped on your question, so go ahead, ask another question.
Well, I wanted to. Now I got JJ. Just you mentioned. I think when you said Mid-South, a lot of us know that as Mid-Southern, which is Austin Idol, Jerry the King Lawler, Jimmy Hart. Were you there for the Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman 1981 feud? Were you around for that, JJ?
Yes, I was, and I knew things about that. There was only 3 people in the world that really knew what the deal was on all that, and I was the third person.
4 people, JJ.
Mm-hmm.
I was there from the get-go.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Andy Kaufman?
Fabulous. He brought a whole nother dimension to wrestling that was totally unexpected and unprepared for.
Yeah.
And when he would challenge you, I'll wrestle any woman that wants to be brave enough and all that. And he went to Vince and WWF to start with, and they didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want it.
I
They
know.
thought, no, as if this is too much carnival. But wait a minute. Look at how much carnival WWF was in those years.
Well, you know what, JJ, I got to tell you, and in the interest of full disclosure, I've told this story publicly, but never on my podcast. I actually told it on another show.
Mm-hmm.
I knew Andy Kaufman. I knew him very well.
Oh, really?
I took Andy to a wrestling match at the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just starting to take off, and people knew who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended, this is the truth, I attended a show with Andy Kaufman, dressed as an old woman, and he was dressed as an old man. And we went as a couple.
Oh, man.
That's true.
Awesome.
That's a true story.
That is awesome.
When are you going to take off the costume, Angelo?
I knew about Jerry Lawler angle from the get-go. I was one of the people that knew, along with J.J. Maguire, Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman, and one other person, J.J. Let's not leave out our friend Bill Apter.
Yeah. Okay. Correct.
Well, if I may, then, since you were both there and you mentioned the territory at the time, what do you guys think of how that was portrayed, that era, those people in the Man on the Moon film? Do you think they accurately
like JJ said, and I will echo JJ's sentiments, it was wrestling gold. That's
Yes.
what pro wrestling was. It was, tell me if I'm wrong, JJ, it was sport, it was spectacle, it was showbiz, it was everything that you wanted it to be.
That's right, and more. A fan never left any of those shows going, what a jip. That was a jip. I want my money back. I never heard anybody ever want their money back, ever.
I'm waiting for one of you guys to turn into Tony Clifton at any moment now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I actually played Tony Clifton once.
I had the feeling you did.
I did.
A gut feeling that was coming.
You can't make this shit up.
If
you don't believe me, ask Bob Zamuda.
I can. That Bob Zamuda was Andy's close confidant. That's a fascinating story.
I knew Bob.
Is that how you, Angelo, and JJ met? Was back then? Did you guys know each other, cross paths in that era?
No, believe it or not, I actually, JJ and I have never met in person.
No, never.
But JJ and I have a shit ton of mutual friends. A lot.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I wanted to ask JJ, for some reason, there's a song that's on the tip of my mind tonight as we talk to JJ Maguire, and it's Coco Beware the Birdman. Because when Angela was asking about the wrestlers singing, Coco, who also came from Memphis wrestling, Coco Beware was probably the best natural singer of the bunch as far as the wrestlers. Would that be about right?
Yeah. He did a great job on Pile Driver. Now, we didn't write Pile Driver for him, though. That was written by someone else. I can't remember who wrote that exactly, and I have to look it up. But
what about the Birdman song? The Birdman, bird, 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 bird.
Yeah. I wrote it and played it all, and Jimmy wrote the lyrics. And I produced it and recorded it all and did the whole thing with him. And he did the lyrics.
It's a very upbeat song that really matched Coco's character, because you knew that Coco 9 times out of 10 wasn't going to beat Nikolai Volkov or Butch Reed, but he'd put up a good fight and he'd go in there and it was very upbeat with Frankie.
But he was entertaining doing it. That's the whole point.
There you go. Thank you, Angelo. Thank you.
That's the whole point. It didn't matter if you won or lost, because in wrestling, wins and losses, I don't care what Cody Rhodes says. I'm sorry, Cody, I love you, but wins and losses don't matter, and titles don't matter. They're props. In wrestling, it's all about the spectacle, the sport, and the entertainment. It's, it's to steal a line from JR. Jim Cornette likes to steak and Vince Russo likes to sizzle. Well, wrestling is both. It's steak and sizzle. That's right. What real wrestling is. It's, it's sport and spectacle. It always was. And I hope one day, I really thank God, listen to me. I hope one day that it returns to that, because what I'm seeing now, and actually, JJ, I'm going to ask you about this. What are your thoughts, my friend, on this whole, what Mike Messier calls the empty arena era?
It's mind-boggling. I would never thought that I would live to see a day where you would have to do something in that fashion, that way. It's, I think it's hurting the business.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's absolutely destroying the business. It really is. I would much rather, JJ, that they put reruns on of WrestleMania or just about anything else. So let me ask you from a fan standpoint, because I know you watch the product, and I know you've been a wrestling fan, your whole life.
Yes.
What do you enjoy in a match? What is your perfect match? If you had the book, the perfect JJ Maguire match, who do you want to see?
Wow, that's a tough question, brother. One of the best matches I ever saw in my whole life. I mean, let's face it, there's been quite a few of them. We could go on all night on that, but one of the greatest matches that I've ever witnessed, 8 feet away, between the rail and the ring in the corner, was when I sang the national anthem at that Legends show a little bit over a decade ago down in Memphis. and it was the match between Hulk Hogan and Big Show. This hasn't been seen, other than if you were there. This was one of the grandest matches ever, and Hulk and Big Show worked in a fashion that was more like the Japanese programs, where it's less circus and more actual realism.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to describe this match, but I've never seen so many devastating chops thrown continually in my life in any match ever in history, period. It was a fabulous match, but VH1 filmed it all for part of Hogan's show or whatever, but they only used a little tiny clip, but they wanted to put it on as a whole feature thing, but they claimed that this was before a lot of, the current digital stuff where you can burst shots and, as your filmmaker friend there knows, that you can do things to help scenes that were too dark and whatever. But they claimed that it was the whole thing wasn't lit bright enough for them to show the whole thing. But somebody needs to go to VH1 and procure that entire show, because the critics that were there said that it was the only show in wrestling history that the timing was absolutely perfect from beginning to end.
Wow.
And I would like for you to be able to see it. I'm trying to describe something that you can't visualize because you haven't seen it, and majority of the people in the world haven't. But
JJ, I'm surprised. I have to tell you, I'm really surprised that Vince McMahon and or WWE, with all their stroke and money, haven't found a way to procure that footage.
I know. It's a baffler.
It's just really mind-boggling to me.
It was really a fabulous program, and that's all I can tell you. And of course, handsome Jimmy Valiant wrestled, and all the icons that were there, and Superstar Dundee, and on and on and on. But that match,
I love Bill Dundee.
He's a great guy. Great guy.
Yeah, he's funny as shit too.
Mm-hmm.
He is a funny guy. Dan the Man, you got questions for JJ?
Yeah, I was actually going to chime in. A friend of mine was at that show and recorded, before the days of everybody having a camera in their pocket, recorded some of it. That Matt, you're absolutely right. How the quality of the match between Hogan and Big Show. It's funny how everything works out for a reason, because the original plan was for the Legends main event to be Hulk Hogan and Jerry Lawler.
That's correct.
And if I remember, the WWE blocked Jerry Lawler because of a contract issue.
Well, yes and no. Jerry's son, I was in the back, and Jerry got on the payphone and said, "Dad, you blew it. You should have been here." He was fussing at Jerry about it. He said, "No matter what, you should have been here, because this is the show of all shows, and you weren't here. And you're the king of Memphis, and it's a mistake, Dad, that you didn't come."
It was his hometown.
Yeah.
He's the king down there. He had two kings, Presley and him.
Exactly.
And, but his son was really upset with him, and I heard the whole conversation. I was just standing not more than 8 feet away and listening to the whole thing. And
we'll really talk about Elvis in a minute too.
Is that Scotty Tuhati? Isn't that his son?
No, Brian Christopher.
Yeah, the other one.
Yeah, Brian Christopher was on the show. That's correct.
Was that 2002? Was that the era of that?
That sounds right. I'm not real sure. It's been so long. I haven't really looked at. I can't remember the exact date on it. That sounds right.
Mikey, I think it was 0102. Right around.
Because Jerry Lawler had that 6 month sabbatical. Jerry Lawler was gone from WWE for about 6 months around WrestleMania 17.
Yeah, they had, if I remember correctly, they had fired his fiance wife, and he quit in protest.
Stacy the cat.
You guys know what you're talking about and know the history of wrestling well. Now you tell me, Jerry Lawler standing there looking at Hulk Hogan, the only thing that looked almost as simple-minded was The Rock and Hulk Hogan. Hulk just makes these people look like midgets.
Yeah.
Lawler would have looked like a child up there next to Hulk. And the real thing is he feared that. He knew that Hogan would overshadow him in his own domain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was it, JJ, was it really like that ego thing? You know, I have met Jerry a few times. I actually ring announced a couple of his matches here in New Jersey. He's always been a great guy with me, but I have heard, and you probably would know better than I, but I have heard that he could be difficult to do business with.
Well, he was like, he ran the programs the way it was his show, period.
Okay, fair enough.
You did what the king had laid out, that's what you went with. And you didn't variety from there or argue. You just did. It's like being in the military. This is your mission. Get going.
Yeah.
But Jerry was nice to me. Like I told on the other show and everything. He's always polite to me and everything, but I wasn't a wrestler and I wasn't wrestling for him and whatever. But he's in just regular day-to-day life, you wouldn't meet a nicer person than Jerry Lawler.
You know, and I think that may be the common bond, JJ. You and I are not wrestlers, and I think he does treat, you know, non-wrestlers different than, you know, the quote, the boys. Dan,
yes,
you got a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we could circle back, talking about everything as far as it's kind of fallen into place. One of my favorite music stories, you'd mentioned the Beatles earlier, was when they were filming what was at the time 8 Arms to Hold You. At the last second, they changed the name of the movie to Hard Day's Night and basically called John Lennon on a Saturday and said, Monday morning, we need a song called Hard Day's Night. And on demand writes a hit. You were talking about how you threw the honky, you know, the honky tonk man, and how you were able to throw music together. Do you have any thoughts or stories with that where you something just clicked, everything perfect, bam, bam, and you look at the product and like everything just flowed, you know, that hit on demand pretty much?
I'd say a Demolition theme. Demolition, really? Yeah. Yep. They heard it. They came down there and said, who's that for? And I said, that's for you. We love it. And really, it's one of my favorite things that I came up with, I think, as simple as it is and everything. It fit. Bill told me I appeared at the show Heroes and Legends that he was at in Fort Wayne last year. And he just kept going on and on and on about it. He said, Maguire, we would never have been what we became if we didn't have had that theme. I said, listen, man, if y'all came out with kazoos playing, you would still be one of the greatest of all time. The music didn't make you. He said, no, the music did make us. The music added what we didn't have.
JJ, I am actually going to go there. Have you, I want to ask just in kind of in a two-part way.
Sure.
Have you written music that you knew internally would get someone over, or have you written music that you knew someone needed in order to get over?
I'm the Mountie, and then I'm not the Mountie.
Okay.
Now, if he got up there and sang an Elvis song, would that have worked as well? No. It was a special custom song just for his goofy character. You know,
yeah.
I think that's an answer to your question.
Is it hard to write music for a comedy act? Let's be honest about it. You know, Pierre Rougeau, of course, the Mountie, it was a bit of a comedy act. You know, he was self-deprecating. And is it hard to write for that kind of persona?
Well, I'm going to tip my hat to Jimmy on this one because the words really made that whole comedic entrance entree. I mean, those words are formidable and fit just what you're saying, you know, a comedic type of edge, you know. Without those words, you know, we don't like heavy metal. We don't like rock and roll. All we like to listen to is Barry Manilow. I mean, come on. That's the mind of Jimmy Hart, you know. And that made it to me. His awesome lyrical ability and ability to hear what sounds right and so on. And, Jimmy Hart's one of the smartest people that's ever been in the wrestling business and underrated in that genre. And Jimmy had more great things that you saw through those years were Jimmy Hart's concepts, perhaps, than even Vince McMahon.
Mike Kelleher has a question.
Well, so, you talked about WWF not having any records at the time, but I actually just recently picked up the WWF record, and it had Rowdy Roddy Piper, Brutus Beefcake. I'm trying to remember everybody who's on it, but it's like a who's who of WWF superstars back in the day, except Hulk Hogan. No Hulk Hogan on it.
The wrestling album.
Yeah, the wrestling album. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that was the first one. The first one we didn't have any music on the first one. They had Land of a Thousand Dances and a lot of cover stuff on there. You know? Yeah. And then they realized, wait a minute, we do a lot better to have our own handcrafted themes that they can sell and make money on and blah blah blah. You know.
Good,
That's
Mike.
where I was going with that was how did you transition from the first record into the other ones that came out later? But
good question.
Yeah, that's Vince realized that in WWE or WWF realized that we're going to do better to have our own original thing rather than. And see, they ran into a licensing problem with Eye of the Tiger with Hulk Hogan because that was Survivor, and they wanted the company wanted big money every time it's played, and so Vince just got to thinking, wait a minute, Jimmy Hart and his partner Maguire, they know how to do this kind of stuff too. And of course, they had Jim Johnson was doing stuff for them when they were just a local, low budget. Playing high school arenas and, not as good as a lot of the independent wrestling companies we go and see today, Yeah. And so that's kind of how that all went from there. But we just came in. We were lucky that we were able to come in at a time that we did, and when all those future greatest of all time icons like Hulk and everybody coming in, and they were coming in so fast that I mean, I was burning up my equipment quickly because there's so many talents coming in and needing so many themes so fast that, and Johnson, he took a job doing music for Deep Space Nine, the TV show.
Yeah. JJ, did Vince McMahon or WWE at any time ever petition for membership into BMI or ASCAP?
Well, the publisher, which was Titan Sports, the publisher can be with every organization. They can be with BMI, ASCAP, and CSAC. But a writer has to choose one of the three. You can't be a writer with all three. You got to be with one or of the other. And so,
who were you and Jimmy with?
I made the deal on everything for it all. I got us with CSAC because CSAC was an independently owned company, and they actually gave advances to where that BMI and ASCAP. They got when they would mention the word advance, it really wasn't the truth. What it is they told me they said, well, we'll take you over to the bank and we'll co-sign any kind of loan for you. Well, what the hell? What kind of deal is that? Let me call a mafia buddy and make a deal.
The interest you'd have to pay back is ridiculous.
Unbelievable. And so I said, no, thank you. So I called CSAC, and like I told on the other show, for those that didn't hear it, I'll tell it again real quick. The Pile Driver album came out. We had our first 3 songs on there, Demolition, Honky Tonk Man, and Jimmy did a song we wrote called Crank It Up.
Yeah.
And so I called ASCAP and BMI, same old thing. And a lot of my friends that had signed BMI and ASCAP, they were crying about their royalties being late and being cheated out of money. And I'm not saying that they're cheaters and liars and so on, but figures lie and liars figure. So there you go. And So I called CSAC, and CSAC was actually the first performing rights society. It goes all the way back to Woody Guthrie.
Yeah.
And so I said, this is J.J. Maguire. I said, myself and my partner Jimmy Hart, we're doing a lot of music for WWF right now, and which is a pretty big outfit. And one moment, please. And the phone picks up and goes, hello, this is Tom Casey, Vice President of CSAC. JJ, how are you? And I went, Tom, I'm okay. He said, you won't believe this, but I'm sitting here holding the Pile Driver album. I picked it up on my lunch break, and I just come back to the office, and I've just been listening to it, and the receptionist dialed up and said that you were on the phone, and I'm holding the album in my hand as we speak.
That's wild.
That's awesome.
That's the truth, too, God's truth. And he said, we can make any kind of deal within or without of reason. Can you be down here next Tuesday? Wow. I said, I can be down there tomorrow if you want me to.
Be there in 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I went down on Tuesday and made our deal for us. The first part of the leg of the deal, and of course we were burning it up. We were on all the outlets, on major networks, in all the coliseums and auditoriums around the world, and yeah, I mean, there wasn't any problem at all. So I made the deal. I'm the guy that put the whole deal together, and then I had to deal with WWF. They were dumb on the record business because they weren't dumb on the wrestling business, but they didn't know shit from Shinola about really the record business.
Yeah.
So I had to enlighten them to a lot of aspects of that, and I guess what bit of music that Johnson had done for them, he had done it all through his auspices and everything. Truth be told, Jim Johnson actually probably made more money through the things that he wrote than Vince and them ever made. And then by the time they finally figured that out, it was a whole other show. And then we had 96% of all WWF music from late 80s up through 2000.
Amazing.
So, but I was the guy that put the deal together and everything. And Tom Casey was a wrestling fan and knew the business, and he was a sports genius, and he could tell you how far of a hit that any baseball player made from the beginning of baseball and history. He was just a genius on stats and a great guy and loved wrestling. And that's how it started. And we went from there. And I wound up making millions of dollars for WWE, and for Jimmy and myself and CSAC, because CSAC was able to sell performance licenses that would around the world, and that was gigantic revenue.
Huge. JJ, we got a question from Mike Messier, then we're going to go to Dan.
It's, funny, JJ, I forgot to mention on the last show, I was actually in a rock and roll wrestling band for a short period of time. We were called the Figure Four, and we had a couple of good songs. I was the singer. We had a Title Shot. We had a song called Battle Royal. But my bandmates at the end of our very first show wanted to catch me off guard. They started playing the riff to the Demolition theme song just to challenge me, and lo and behold, I was able to rattle off a good portion of the lyrics spontaneously to honor Demolition in a spontaneous cover of your music. Now, we didn't have ASCAP or CSAC there in attendance to get your commission. I'm sorry, but we'll look into that.
No problem whatsoever. I'm glad. I appreciate. Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Well, it was just when it's not really hyperbole to say that these songs, the Birdman, Coco Beware, Crank It Up, that the Young Stallions used to irritate Jimmy Hart. I remember that quite well, that they brought the music in for the Young Stallions to annoy Jimmy Hart for a babyface tag team of Paul Roma and Jimmy Powers. But it really is the soundtrack of our lives and our childhood. But I wanted to ask you a question, kind of an existential question. You've dealt with Hollywood, you've dealt with actors, you've dealt with wrestling people. Can you speak on kind of where that line between ego and talent can get blurred or overlap, because you're a very humble guy. You tell it as it happened. You don't have any braggadocio, but having been around actors and wrestlers myself, sometimes there is some ego and vulnerability with these type of high-end people. Do you have any thoughts on who's got the worst type of egos, or who's more vulnerable, or yeah, what do you think?
Well, that's a great question. I'll have to tell you, it's all in the person. I always go back to Bob Hope of all things. Of course, a lot of young people go, Bob Hope, or the kids go, who's Bob Hope? But we know who Bob Hope was.
Sure.
And I worked directly with Bob Hope some, and Bob Hope was the type of person that he's like your uncle that from Capixie or wherever. He was just a regular guy he never changed his demeanor or his ego, though he was the biggest comedian, one of the biggest comedians that's ever lived, and talents that's ever been in show business, film, and everything. And I found that the greatest stars were the most humble people.
Mm-hmm.
That's my experience of working with Alice Cooper and he and on and on and on and on. These greatest stars were really extremely normal, humble people, and that's why they lasted so long and kept their fame until they passed away or whatever. They were humble. They were normal, acting, humble people. That's all I can tell you. Bob Hope was just like, when he came to Glen Glen Sound and met him at the door and said, Mr. Hope, welcome to Glen Glen. I'm in charge of taking care of anything that you need. If you want phone calls you want down there on the sound stage, or what food you want brought down, or do you not want any call? However you want it, we'll fix it. And I said, he said, first of all, John, I'm not Mr. Hope. Mr. Hope was my father, and he's dead. I said, well, could I call you Uncle Bob? He laughed at that, and I thought, oh, my God, I made one of the funniest guys that's ever lived laugh. And I thought, what another example of my life in Heaven Town. That doesn't really mean Hollywood per se. That does mean part of Hollywood. But what it really means is that all these events that have happened in my lifetime have been just like I've been living in heaven.
Yeah.
It's all been positive and happy, and I've had my share of blows and things, but not related with the music or the show business. Just
right.
Had some health issues at one time and different things. But I found that the greatest stars, most of the greatest stars, were very humble people.
JJ, Mikey so appropriately says that you are a humble guy, and I
appreciate that. I do. Thank you. I don't know how to perceive that. I when people say that, and people say, if I had $1 for every time somebody's told me that your music is the fabric of my life, if I had $1 for every time I've been told that, I would have maybe a quarter of as much money as Vince McMahon. And it touches me because it's hard to believe.
Yeah, it really is. But you know what? You've been incredibly successful. How do you remain humble? What do you do to stay grounded?
Well, when I had time off and whatever, I always returned home to my parents and my family. And my parents, I wasn't born until they were 42 years old, and my dad was a World War II veteran.
Wow.
And I always kept a close tie to my family, and I really owe what bit of sensibility that I might have to remaining close, where, like in 350 days, you can see how that the rigors of road and rigors of all that hurt people's families and destructed lives and got people addicted and murders and, up and down, everything you can imagine. But I always kind of stayed normal, I guess to say, even though I'd worked with all these icons and done this stuff, my heart was always at home, and I never let go of the family element. and I think that's what really helped me. And then I was raised by older people. My parents are old enough to be my uncles and aunts or whatever, or maybe my grandparents. But I was fortunate to be molded by older people that were good, honest, solid type people that really gave me a good foundation. That's all I can tell you.
And it doesn't hurt that you're from Kentucky, which is, that'll keep you humble and grounded. We should tell people that you were not born with a gold spoon in your mouth. Things were tough.
No, I wasn't.
When you were younger, and it was the fact that you were a musical prodigy is nothing short of a gift from heaven. That you are who you are, and you became what you became. Our friend Dan has a question. Then we're going to go to Baron Von Kelleher. Go ahead, Danny.
Thanks. I think it's awesome to continue Mike's sentiment that how really just grounded and real you seem. I've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of musicians in my life, and you definitely stand out as somebody who understands and appreciates life. And Mike nailed it when he said that, your music was the fabric of our childhood. I mean, everybody knew those songs. I'm curious, you mentioned when we first started that you're still a big fan of the product. Have you ever watched, say, a Raw or WCW, AEW, any of that after you kind of got out of it and said, man, I wish I had the chance? Is there anybody you just absolutely would want the chance to write an entrance theme for?
Good question.
Oh, sure. I've got an alternative theme for quite a few people here. I've got a theme for Cody Rhodes that would probably escalate him even bigger than he is today. And I'm going to go to one of the shows when it comes eventually. And because the last time that I saw Cody, he was a child. And Dusty brought him to one of the shows and all that. But I've got a theme for him that is to die for. Now, I know the fans like Kingdom and everything, but the reason they're going to like whatever he comes out to because he's who he is. And he gives the people the spectacle and the entertainment value we've talked about. But I have a theme here for him that it starts out, the first verse says that he's much more than just a common man. That's the first line. It's a jazzy, Angelo would love it. It's a jazzy type, simple 4-instrument thing that's very simple and whatever. And I wouldn't mind doing a theme for Tessa Blanchard.
Really?
And I talked to Tessa at that when I appeared at in New York at the big event back in November. And I've got something that'd be great for her too. But of course now AEW, they hired Mikey Ruckus, and Mikey Ruckus does excellent work. But Mikey Ruckus is more of he's not really to me. I'm not knocking him, but he's a specialty sound effect workout type music creator. He doesn't come from a background of hit records and stuff like Jimmy Hart and I have, you see.
Yeah. It's more synthetic, JJ, a lot of synthesizer fabricated. Maybe I hate to use that word, but for lack of a better term, it's more fabricated.
Yeah, that might be okay. But now I like Mikey does the best work in the business for like those workout things and football and sports stuff of that kind of nature. But listen, as we know, wrestling is a specialized form of entertainment. It's not like football. It's not like cheerleading, cheer music. It does have elements of that. But the thing I think that really helped us so much is we created all sorts of different genres of real music. And plus, I had classical music training and all that. And I wasn't just a garage musician that kind of picked up stuff that way starting out like we all did. But I was formally trained. So I had a leg up on a lot of stuff. and I could play a lot of instruments because of that formal training I had in classical music as a child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, JJ, I'll tell you what, my friend, this is your second time on the show. It will most certainly not be your last. But tonight I have to let you go. That was a fast 1 hour.
Yes.
I will be talking to you tomorrow about our little side project.
Sure.
Okay. And but for now, I'm going to have to say goodnight to you. And there's so much to cover with J.J. Maguire. I mean, you're talking about, a fullness of life. We had J.J., we had Karen McDaniel here last night, the late Wahoo McDaniel's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about, squeezing a lifetime, 3 or 4 lifetimes worth of living into 58 or 63 years or whatever it was that Wahoo lived. But,
Yes.
at your young age, I'll tell you what, brother, you've got about 5 lifetimes inside you.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Angelo, and I think you do too. I thought that I'd worked and met a lot of A-list people, but I think you may have beat me. You've worked and been with many, many great legends yourself, and you understand the heart of legends. Just that's something we both have in common, is that we understand the heart of the legends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. JJ, you are my friend. I love you, brother. I am going to let you go, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds great. And you guys have a good evening, and thank you so much for all the comments and accolades. And I'd just like to say God gave me talent, so I took it to the greatest show on earth. I traveled the world with the greatest of all time. Unbelievably entertained people of color in all walks of life. Who knew that wrestling is such a powerful force? I think we all did.
Well said.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Testify, brother.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, JJ.
Take care, JJ.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you very much.
You too. Thanks,
sir.
JJ.
Mm-hmm.
Take care.
Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Good night now. Bye-bye.
Wow. Great, great interview. I'll tell you what, whenever J.J. Maguire is with us, he never ceases to amaze me. He pulls out the stories from his life, and he's barely scratched the surface,
Right.
And we've had him here twice.
Well, Angelo, tonight we learned about your Tony Clifton moments, and I want to hear more about that at some point.
That's exactly where I want to go.
Right.
Andy Kaufman is what I want to know. Where is he?
Andy was a great guy.
He still is. He's alive, and you know
He's
where he is.
goofing on Elvis.
He and Elvis are hanging out with Amelia Earhart.
Andy Kaufman was really
And
an
Jim
inspiration.
Morrison.
Well, Andy and Jim Morrison are inspirations for me. Andy Kaufman, what he did with intergender wrestling, he was intergender wrestling before intergender wrestling with Tessa Blanchard 30 or 40 years later.
Oh,
so,
sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
well,
of course,
Andy was a trendsetter in so many ways. It's funny when people talk about, and I'll just relate some personal stuff. When people talk about, comedic geniuses, they often mention Andy. Andy never considered himself a comedian. He wasn't. He never told jokes. He never told stories. Andy simply parodied what he saw around him. What you saw Andy do with, lip syncing to Mighty Mouse and doing Elvis, he did that in his parents' house in his bedroom. That's what he did. He was a lonely kid and used to entertain himself. His audience was his wall. And that's how he used to entertain himself. And he was a big Elvis fan, and he loved wrestling. And he used to, as I said, entertain himself by putting, the Mighty Mouse record on and lip syncing to it and doing the pantomiming the actions, What you saw was Andy. That wasn't a comedian. Now we would call somebody like Andy a performance artist,
right.
But he really was just a really laid back, very soft spoken guy with a wicked sense of humor, brother. I'm going to tell you what. He had a wicked sense of humor. And he was a really, really nice guy. And I was honored to be able to know him and talk to him and go to a couple of wrestling matches with him, even if I had to wear a dress and makeup.
That Spectrum show must have been headlined by Backlund versus Killer Khan.
I'll tell you what it was. It was Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat versus Johnny Valiant and Mr. Fuji.
Wow.
Wow.
And I still have the pictures.
And the loudest fan in attendance was a really ugly old lady. Is that what you're telling me?
No, that would have been the old man at ringside shaking his cane at all the heels as they were coming out the dressing room.
Please tell me there's at least a picture or something from some of those nights.
If there is, I don't have one.
Oh.
I've got pictures of the matches, but I don't have pictures of us. But I'm sure somewhere. In fact, Mike Messier, here's your homework.
Sure.
Uh-oh.
You're going to have to scrub all the Spectrum Wrestling from 1987 to 1989.
Okay.
That's a lot of Spectrum Wrestling.
Yeah.
We're there somewhere.
Well, it would have been, I think it would have been before that. I think it would have been 84 or 85, early 85. When Andy passed away, I think in mid 85. And because I think Andy was alive for the first WrestleMania.
You're right. You know what? My time frame is wrong.
So I got to think that you probably, if it was Johnny V and Mr. Fuji as a tag team.
Yeah, you know what? It was. I'll tell you what it was. The network that broadcast it and was in Philadelphia was called Prism.
Okay.
And they went out of business in 86.
Right.
Okay. So you're absolutely right. It predates that time frame.
And Steamboat, for his part, it wasn't until about summer of 85 that Ricky Steamboat was a big deal in the WWF because he had to build himself up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking that match you guys saw was soon really the last 8 months or so of Andy's life.
Yeah, and it wasn't long after that. I remember Hulk beat the Sheik at the MSG in, I think, 84.
January 23rd, 1984, yes.
84. And I know that Hulk only had the belt for a couple of years when Andy and I went to the Spectrum and saw he and Ricky Steamboat tag teaming.
I'm looking it up.
And it wasn't long after that. Maybe
couple months, maybe, because Andy Kaufman died in the spring of 84.
Yeah. It wasn't long after that at all. It wasn't long at all.
January was the Monsoon's famous call.
It might have been one of the last. Yeah, it might have been one of the last times I actually saw him. To be honest.
Can I suggest could have been March 30th, 1986, and could the match have been actually Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat versus Mr. Fuji, Johnny V, and Magnificent Morocco 2-on-3?
Thank you.
Okay, March 30th, 1986.
Okay.
We got the match on YouTube.
Wow.
It's there. Okay.
I don't mess around.
I knew Messier would find it.
Yeah.
Were you guys?
Yeah, it sure was.
I'll send you the link. It's readily available on YouTube. I don't want to give away the link in case Vince is listening and he shuts us down before people can see it.
Man, I just got here. Don't get us a cease and desist on my second show.
That's right.
No, that won't happen.
Angelo, were you guys sitting close to the ring?
No, we were actually in the mezzanine level up about midway.
Okay.
And
it was on an angle like we were probably like midway here on the incline. And then there was the Spectrum had two upper balconies. It was ringside, and there was like a kind of a hockey rink setup. There were seats beyond that, and then it would incline. Then you had the second balcony, and then the third balcony, like what they call the nosebleed section.
Mm-hmm.
and we were in the middle of that incline.
Okay, well, wait a second, buddy, because now we have some conspiracy going on here. Because I just looked up that Andy Kaufman was reported to have passed away May 16th, 1984. So either Angelo was hiding a falsely deceased Andy Kaufman in the Philadelphia Spectrum in 1986, and Andy did not pass away, and we've uncovered this conspiracy that our buddy Angelo is in, or Angelo, you might be merging two memories into one.
Probably. I remember specifically Hulk Hogan and Ricky Steamboat. That I remember.
I'm going to keep looking for you, buddy, because I'm thinking maybe you saw Hulk Hogan.
That much I remember, because I still have the pictures.
Yes, so I'm going to look into this for you. We'll figure this out.
That I remember.
No, I know.
So anyway,
so many
while Mike is doing his hunt, the Baron von Kelleher, what's up on the refs roundtable?
News and
can you be a little bit more this is a video podcast. Can you be more animated, more excited?
I'm saving it for the round table. No, it's
he's so low key, Dan. He really is.
And yeah. I'm still blown away by that mustache.
You should have seen the beard. He had this Bruiser Brody beard going on.
Yeah.
Now he looks like H.B. Haggerty.
We're going to be talking about just the happenings of the week. More people getting released by WWE.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about that now. Who else was released? That I don't know about.
Well, I don't know who you knew.
Well, of course, the big list that they put out was at Sunday or Monday.
Yeah.
The second round of names was all NXT talent.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Who was on, Danny? Who was on that list?
Well, it was Kanellis. It was Maria.
Maria Kanellis and her husband.
And Maria and Mike. Yeah.
Like
wow.
A lot of the NXT guys I hadn't. One of the big ones I thought was the I can never say his name right. He's billed as a Russian, and he fought Keith Lee at NXT Takeover.
Rusev?
Oh, you're talking about Dominik Dijakovic.
Yeah,
Dijakovic.
Yeah, no, Dijakovic is
okay.
still. I thought he was still with the company. He was just on NXT last night.
No, there's another guy with a name that's I think I'm getting him mixed up, but there was somebody else who had kind of a similar name.
Not Rusev.
No, not Rusev.
Oh, yeah, Rusev got released. Well, here's a question. Rusev got released. Did Lana get released with him?
No, she's still.
Because Vince McMahon doesn't find Rusev as attractive in the miniskirt as he does Lana.
Oh, really? Though they kept Lana. Oh, that ought to be interesting.
Well, Vince McMahon's always, going back to the early days, he's always had a penchant, or I don't even know what to call it, a
fetish.
Fetish is a good word for breaking up real life couples.
Well, he doesn't like marriage. That's
storyline.
No, I'm going to tell you, shoot. Okay, I'm going to let you in on the mind of Vince. Vince doesn't like marriage. He doesn't like his own. He doesn't like others.
I believe it.
It's the truth.
I believe it.
He will break up couples every chance he gets, especially real life couples.
Yeah, well, that was old. Randy Savage said that he said the worst mistake he ever made was doing a angle with his wife. He said Vince talked him into doing an angle with his wife, and by the time it was over, he didn't have a wife anymore.
Yeah.
Well, Vince likes to play divide and conquer.
Mm-hmm.
Vince knows that there's power in numbers. If a couple is strong enough to survive Vince McMahon, they're going to make money. But the lure of Vince's money is too strong to one person or another.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And I'll go on record as saying that. So what else is going on, Mike? What at the with the round table? Is that it?
That's pretty much it. I mean, we're gonna talk about Raw and AEW, preview SmackDown, and kind of get set for Money in the Bank, because this whole Money in the Bank thing is taking on a much bigger twist than it has in the past. So I'm really looking, like, I've always looked forward to Money in the Bank, but I'm really looking forward to Money in the Bank this time around.
How are they going to play it off this time with the Money in the Bank? Well,
what they're doing is you have to climb the corporate ladder.
Corporate ladder. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So what they're going to do is, I guess you start on the bottom floor and you fight, and then you go up a floor and you fight, and you keep going until you get to the roof, and that's where the contract is going to be. So
yeah, and you know what? We talked about this last night. And, of course, the millennials don't understand this. Old guys like me do. But that whole corporate ladder thing, guess what? It's been done before.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You mentioned that last night. Who did that?
The National Wrestling Alliance / WCW.
Because I know they had what? Or 94 somewhere in there, the multi-tiered cage you had to fight your way. It was Hogan and Savage against the Alliance. Yeah, the Tower of Doom.
Yeah, the Tower of Doom.
Well, you're talking about,
you had to fight through every level to get out. But I don't remember there being a fight through a building to a prize on the roof.
Peachtree Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Now the home of CNN.
Oh. It
was once just a small 5-story building. Mm-hmm. It's now a mega structure that you literally had to take an elevator to get to the next elevator. It's a big place. But it's been done before. Remember something. There's nothing original in wrestling, and I have tried to drive this point home. There's nothing original in wrestling. It's all been done.
Mm-hmm.
But, you have to be either old enough to remember it or a historian enough to have researched it. But it's all been done. In some form or fashion, the quote, climb the corporate ladder match has been done and redone. The story's been told and retold, and you can only tell it so many times.
Yeah.
What they do, to answer your question, Dan, what they do is they're putting their own little WWE twist on it, their spin.
Right, and that's one
and
thing.
It'll probably culminate on the roof of Titan Tower, and that's been done before too.
Yeah.
Lest we forget that they had a ring set up on the top of Titan Tower before,
mm-hmm.
and shot promos up there, and actually at one point did a couple of matches up there, and people forget that. But they all remember the commercial.
Right.
They all remember the commercial of the helicopters flying overhead with the spotlights down on the ring and the big building and the whole. It's all been done.
Steve Austin and Bret Hart throwing punches with the fire in the background.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's something the WWE has been famous for pretty much ever, is rewriting history to where wrestling outside of their entity doesn't exist. I mean, you saw it with some of the matches they had with the Crown Jewel, like, the first women's match in Saudi Arabia. No, the first WWE match in Saudi Arabia. Women had wrestled there before. NWA went to North Korea. Like, it's hardly the first promotion in a hostile country. How they talk about the women's revolution, and it's the first pay-per-view headlined by women, except that TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan have had women main events going back to the 80s. How
you need to remember something, Dan. History is written by the winner.
Yeah. Well, and let's be fair here. The words they choose are chosen very carefully. So to say this is the first pay-per-view headlined by women, for them, it's accurate. They're not necessarily saying ever. They're saying, it's like, Dan, in Virginia, there's a furniture store called Haynes.
Right.
And every week, this is our one time a year sale. and it's the sale only comes around once. Yeah, because this week only comes around once a year, but every week there's a new sale. So it's all about how you word it and how you put a spin on it, and what you can make people assume.
Yeah, it's very political. You're right in the sense of as long as you choose your words carefully, it's the I'm not lying, the definition of is kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, but I have to jump in real quick, Baron, because sometimes the WWE commentators, whether it's Michael Cole or whoever else, sometimes they slip, okay, and they say things that are historically inaccurate to further the WWE cause. And 9 times out of 10 or 7 times out of 10, they might say the real thing. This is the first WWE women's match in Saudi Arabia, but sometimes they'll slip and they'll say this is the first ever women's match in Saudi Arabia. And then if someone like you or me or any of us correct them on it, they might cover their ass, or they may not choose to, because the reality is they don't consider anything non-WWE to be as valid as themselves. And
very true.
True.
But I did want to follow up real quick, Angelo. I think I might have solved this mystery for you. There was a Philadelphia, PA Spectrum show on March 19th, 1983, televised on the Prism Network, featuring Gorilla Monsoon and Dick Graham on commentary.
Yep, Dick Graham, yep.
Yep, this might have been what you saw with Andy. You had matches such as S.D. Jones versus Baron Mikhail Sakula. You had Jose Estrada versus Pete Sanchez. You had a midgets tag team match. You had Ray Stevens versus Jules Strongbow to a double countout, which is unusual. Tony Gurria got one over on Johnny Rods with a sunset flip. Intercontinental title match, which has been a great match. Don Morocco versus Rocky Johnson with Joey Morella, Gorilla's son, as the ref. That was released on the Best of the WWF Volume 2. You had Superstar Billy Graham versus Salvatore Balemo, and this was the main event. See if it's a similar main event to what you were thinking of 2 years later. This was the main event in 83, a year before Andy passed away. Andre the Giant, Jimmy Snuka, and WWF World Champion Bob Backlund defeated Big John Studd, WWF Tag Team Champion Afa, and Captain Lou Albano, substituting for Sika in a best out of 3 out of 5 falls match. 3 falls to 0 with special guest referees Sweet Hansen and Arnold Skoland at ringside. And because it has that manager element, you were thinking of that Mr. Fuji Johnny V match a couple of years later. But I'm thinking what might have happened, Angelo, is you kind of merged 2 memories into one. I'm thinking
I'm going to have to pull my picture out and look at it. I really am.
Check out I put on the sidebar of our Skype recording tonight, I put in the text, the whole card. I'm thinking this is probably what you saw with Andy, because it would make sense, because you did mention Dick Graham on commentary and the Prism Network. You said that before I went into this research. That's just my theory.
I'm going to have to check that. I still have the picture. I'm going to see if there's a timestamp on it.
What I'm gonna have to look up that. See if the video's there, because that sounds like a hell of a card.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Their house shows at the Spectrum rivaled anything that WrestleMania would have. They really have. Well, Baron Von Kelleher, I am going to let you go. And I will look for a refs roundtable, maybe this weekend? I can't hear you. We're on video.
Yes.
There you go. I got to make you more camera savvy, bud.
Yeah, I'm only on TV, whatever.
Yeah, but you're not real camera savvy. All right. I love you too, you fucker. All right, Mikey. Take care, brother.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Take care.
All right, guys. It's just the 3 of us now. All right. Mike Messier, what's coming up with you? What do you got going on?
Well, I did want to mention, and hopefully Vince McMahon won't shut this whole thing down, but because of our listeners,
he won't.
I do this a lot, guys. I go to YouTube, I go to other nefarious sources of content, and I find these old house shows of WWF wrestling that were televised for the local markets, and they have all types of exciting matches that you didn't see on Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
You're basically seeing the feed of the house shows from places like the Spectrum, Madison Square Garden, my old stomping grounds of the Capitol Center. And you're right. These shows sound so good.
Mm-hmm.
They are good.
They really were amazing.
You know,
Yeah.
They really,
that
really
goes,
were.
the first time you and I spoke, Angelo, we brought up our old friend George and some of the matches he recorded.
Oh, sure.
As good as YouTube and some of those independent sources, some of the better matches I've ever seen were some fan recording or some minor recording that wasn't the official broadcast.
And actually, George is going to be with us on June 18th. I actually spoke to him.
Okay.
And we confirmed his date. George Pantis is the archivist and historian of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, a la Jim Crockett. And he owns, to this very day, all of the original footage, every photograph. He owns it all. And we're going to have him on to talk about the glory days of the Crockett era.
Wow.
Yeah, and I know, Mikey,
George has got some stories.
Yeah, George, oh my God, George is like a treasure trove of stories. So that's going to be Mike Messier and Dan the Man and myself. The Refs Roundtable is still up in the air. We're going to have maybe 2 or 3 more episodes, and I will probably end up re-altering the Refs Roundtable morph it into another show, because we're going to do some more non-wrestling stuff on the network. So, Mikey, plug your social media, your website, and then I will say goodnight to you.
Well, I think I just found this match, by the way, from the Spectrum, so I want to send you that link, Angelo, that main event at least, of Andre Backlund and Snuka versus Stud, Albano, and Alpha. In the meantime, MikeMessier.com is always the best way to find me. On the Wrestling with the Future YouTube channel, you can see my new personal podcast, Life Lessons with Mikey Messier. Thanks, Angelo, and thanks, everybody, for watching that. My theater festival, Avalonia 7 Theater Festival, just decided the victors are now announced on distancefromavalon.com. Go to the top and click on the theater section. And the film festival, Avalonia Film Festival, is still accepting submissions. And even though of this time of worldwide crisis, because of the power of the internet and these websites that I established years ago, still able to promote and honor the winners of both my film festival and theater festival, because although the arts right now are threatened because we can't interact in public as much,
right,
it's still important and vital to keep that stuff going.
Sure.
But thanks for having me on the show, Angelo, and Dan. Always love that.
You're part of the family, kid.
Thank you. And Dan, that background you have there, I really enjoy seeing all those wrestlers. I feel, no offense to Terry Taylor, but without his red mohawk, clucking his head like a chicken, I feel like
I know, right? Well,
Mike,
gimmick. Take care, my friend. I will see you. Let me see. When do I will see you again. Tuesday night. We should point out Tuesday night, May the 28th. I'm sorry, April the 28th.
Okay.
I have a non-wrestling show with Steve McCoy, the country's foremost Tom Jones impersonator, who is a childhood friend of mine. And we're going to talk news, politics, coronavirus, aliens, Bigfoot, conspiracy theories, and anything else that we decide to talk about.
Nice.
So that will be, but the next time I see you two gentlemen, will be, excuse me, I'm back for a second, folks, will be on April the 30th, and that will be a special surprise show. I'm not going to tell you about it.
Sounds good.
All right. Mikey, have a good night, my friend. We're going to say good night.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great night, Angelo. Thanks.
You bet. All right. Just you and me, Dan.
Sounds good.
So what do you think of that conversation with JJ Maguire?
That's impressive. I mean, I know I said the same thing about Karen, but it's crazy to hear how, for lack of a better word, how simple some of it was. Like, you think, I mean, these classic songs that so perfectly fit a character. I pictured, a room with, the floor covered in crumpled papers, and they're up all night. To think it was literally just Jimmy Hart banging on a trash can, click, some lyrics, music hit, and 10 minutes later we're in the production truck, bam, hit, bam, hit. How easy he made it sound. I mean, I don't know, maybe he's a good storyteller, but to be able to pump out so much quality music literally in minutes is crazy to think.
It's remarkable, isn't it? It really, really is.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, and we have to bring him back because, well, first of all, he's a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, we've, and I keep saying it, we barely scratched the surface.
Right.
With J.J. Maguire. There's so much there. His book is like, if you've never read his book, I encourage everyone to read his book called Hollywood, My Life in Heaventown.
My Life in Heaventown, you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called Hollywood, My Life in Heaventown. It's a great book. Let's talk about some of our upcoming guests. Now, you're a young guy, so some of these names might be over your head, youngin. So, but let's talk about in May. We've got some super guests coming up in May. Young man named Magnum TA. What do you know about Magnum TA?
Magnum TA was a territory face when I was growing up. Related to Jake Roberts, if I remember correctly.
Sure.
Through marriage, right?
He's Tessa Blanchard's stepfather.
Yes. Yeah, that connection. And he was, well, they had a term for him. I'm trying to remember. There was a big push. I can't. Get down.
As a cat.
I can't remember the term they had for him, but there was a wave of the baby faces at the time that were just all young, attractive men. You had, Terry Taylor and Magnum TA and the Rock and Roll Express, and it was just every.
Yeah, they were all studs.
Yeah, that's a good word, but yeah, I remember him from that, but he didn't travel through some of the areas I grew up, so I saw him more in the magazines and the tapes than I ever did on TV.
Yeah. On May 6th, we've got Evan Ginsberg and Bill Pierce from the WWE. You know who Evan Ginsberg is?
I have heard that name.
He's the associate producer of The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke.
That's right. We spoke on the phone about him. Yes, because
he's also the associate producer of 350 Days.
Yes, which I watched the other night after your recommendation. Phenomenal.
Yeah, good movie. Great movie. And with him is going to be Bill Pierce. Bill Pierce worked for the WWF under the name Chris Michaels.
Chris Michaels.
Yeah, Chris Michaels. And he also worked under the name Bill Pierce. He was an enhancement talent, but he tag teamed with Tony Garea and tag teamed with Tito Santana.
Oh, nice.
And had a little run there. On May 7th, the genius Leapin' Lanny Poffo will be here. What do you know about Lanny Poffo?
Other than one of the most articulate people I've ever heard in my life. Completely underrated. Oh, I don't want to say underrated. Everybody loved him, but I underutilized for as talented as he was.
Good term. Yeah. Underutilized for sure.
Yes. I mean, really, even though it was, you mentioned, sometimes you get characters that are almost a joke. When he had the genius gimmick, I thought that was one of the best heel managers I've ever seen in my life, and it was almost treated like an afterthought to the rest of the roster. But
I know,
amazing talent. I look forward to.
It might surprise you who came up with the genius gimmick.
Really,
Pat Patterson.
Oh well, that man's credited with a lot of the ideas. Then
I'm telling you what. Now we have on May 12th, Flying Brian Pillman Jr. Okay. And he will be with us on the 12th and the 26th.
Nice. I've seen him. He wrestled for VCW, the promotion George works for, the local Vanguard Image Wrestling, the local around here. He's wrestled here a few times.
Oh yeah, sure. Now we have a couple of guys coming on that week that are celebrity wrestler lookalikes.
Really?
we've got Brandon Savage and Randy Hogan.
Now
let me tell you about Brandon Savage. If you saw the Dark Side of the Ring, the Macho Man episode,
the match made in heaven.
Yeah, Brandon Savage was Randy Savage in that show.
Oh, okay.
He was in all the vignettes. He will be here. On the 14th, we will have Danny Cage, the owner of the Monster Factory. The first commercially available wrestling school opened up by my friend, the late Larry Sharp, Pretty Boy Larry Sharp. We will have a wrestling icon on May 19th. That's Doc Diamond. And I want you to do some homework about Doc Diamond. He's a great, great wrestler from the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
And a little bit run in the 80s. He was a great manager, heel manager, and a hell of a worker back in the day. Then we're going to do a special roundtable on May 21st. That's going to be the Dino Bravo episode to follow up the Dark Side of the Ring.
Okay.
We're going to have our own...
The deep dive, I think you talked about.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to be our own unique take on it. And then Brian Pillman Jr. will come back on the 26th to fill out the month of May. And just a couple of side notes for June, we've got Sam Houston for 2 interviews.
Okay.
June 9th and June 11th, Sam Houston will be here. And on June the 16th, Jimmy Snuka's very best friend in the whole world, Phil LaRusso, will be here making a very, very rare podcast appearance. In fact, it's his first podcast ever, and he will break his silence about the man he knew.
Okay.
And but we will respect him and not talk about Allentown, Pennsylvania, and we will not broach that subject.
I understand that.
We will talk about the human side, the man, Jimmy Snuka, the man, the myth, the person. And that's just partly in June. So we've got a lot more to do. I don't want to give too many giveaways right now.
I'll enjoy the surprises.
Well, tell everybody your social and where can they reach you and how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I have the man.wwtf both on outlook.com and Twitter. So I'm trying to get more active in the wrestling discussions on Twitter. The man page is obviously new.
Okay.
So hit me up there and check it out.
I will tell you, I've gotten some amazing feedback on you. Everybody likes you. You're personable. You know your stuff. And that's what I'm looking for.
I've gotten some kind words on social media as well. I appreciate the platform.
And they love your mutton chops, and your sideburns are the thing of Facebook now. Everybody's talking about them.
There you go.
Did you see I put a picture of Rico Constantino up there?
I did, yes. I like you said, maybe one day Rico and I can get the chop off.
Well, you and Rico will have that opportunity sooner than you think.
Oh, I like it.
Because he's coming back on.
Wonderful.
Well, for Dan the Man Sebastiano, I am Psychic Medium Angelo. Till we see you again, folks, take care. Happy wrestling.